Energetic drainage. On many occasions, when I listened to Carlos, he referred to the topic of energy. Each time, he would explain different aspects of it. I have gathered some of them in this chapter to give the reader a more coherent view. His teachings, or rather the teachings of the tradition of seers to which he belonged, begin with the fact that the universe is dual. It is formed by two forces which the old seers symbolized by means of two snakes that are intertwined. But those forces have nothing to do with the dualities we call good and bad, God and devil, positive and negative, or any other kind of opposing pairs we can think of coherently. Rather, they constitute an inexplicable wave of energy, which the Toltecs called the tonal and the Nagual. In an axiomatic way, they established that everything we can interpret or imagine in any way is the tonal, and the rest, which we cannot categorize, is the Nagual. To emphasize that they are not two antagonistic realities, but rather two complementary aspects of one unique force, which they nicknamed the eagle, the seers compared the tonal and the Nagual with the two sides of our physical body, the right side and the left side. And they saw that just as the basic configuration of organisms is almost totally structured from a bilateral symmetry, these are also the forms in which energy manifests itself in the cosmos, and with it, the way we perceive. Life is formed when a portion of the free energy of infinity, which the old seers called the emanations of the eagle, is encapsulated by an external force, becoming a new individual being, aware of himself. And they saw that the perception of the world happens when something they called the assemblage point of perception comes into play. Although that center of selection is in operation in every living being in the universe, the deliberate awareness of oneself on this earth can only be achieved by human beings and a group of species lacking physical organization, whom the seers of antiquity called allies. Interaction between man and these beings is not only feasible, it is something that frequently happens in our dreams. Sorcerers cultivate it, since the consciousness of inorganic beings, which are much older than us, is filled with something that we all covet: knowledge. Having taken on the work of investigating the modes of energy, the sages from Old Mexico were urged to describe to their contemporaries what they had discovered. In their effort to find the most appropriate terms, they said that all that exists is divided into light and dark, like day and night. And from there they derived every thinkable binary description. It is a command which reflects the great cosmic duality. Through their seeing, they discovered that the world of energy is made up of extensive areas of darkness, sprinkled with tiny points of light, and they perceived that the dark areas correspond to the feminine part of the energy, while bright areas correspond to the masculine. They arrived at the inevitable conclusion that the universe is almost in its entirety feminine, and that the bright energy, the masculine, is rare. By definition, they associated darkness with the left side, the Nagual, the unknown, and the feminine, and luminosity with the right side, the tonal, the known, and the masculine. Continuing their observations, they saw that the act of galactic creation happens when the cosmic darkness contracts itself, and from it arises an explosion of light, a spark that expands, giving origin to the order of time and space. The law of this order is that things always have an end, which again implies that the unique and perennial principle of the universe is the dark energy, feminine, creative, and eternal. Likewise, man is divided into the tonal, represented by his daytime vigil, and the Nagual, by his dreams at night. From these observations, the rest of the wisdom of the Naguals is derived. They teach that dreams are a doorway to power, because ultimately, what sustains us is the dark energy, to which we go periodically to be renewed. Consequently, they directed all their power towards perfecting the art of becoming conscious while in the state of dreaming. They called that special kind of attention dreaming, and they used it to deliberately explore the dark energy and come into contact with the source of the universe. In that way, the initial observation of the wise Toltecs became a practical knowledge. One of Carlos' more frequent statements was that the opinions that we form about everything transform our world into something more and more predictable, until the possibility of visiting other worlds becomes a fairy tale. For modern man, he said on one occasion, absolutely everything that exists is put into definite categories. We are labeling machines. We classify the world, and the world classifies us. If once you killed a dog, you are the dog killer for the rest of your life, even if you never touched another one. And those classifications are inherited. He mentioned a series of funny and expressive last names that were related to the characteristics of a particular person. But then the names were bequeathed as an imposition on their descendants, and went to show that, energetically, people are marked. He asserted that the greatest example of that absurd propensity to classify us is what believers call original sin, the sin of Adam and Eve, which makes us all forever sinful and also makes us all behave as sinners. We have become perceptual jailers of each other. The chain of human thought is powerful. Even our deepest feelings are classified and ordered so that nothing can escape. One example is the way we alienate ourselves from the actual time we are living in order to mindlessly go around repeating stereotypes. We have a collection of preset days: Mother's Day, All Saints' Day, Valentine's Day, birthday anniversaries and weddings. They are like stakes we tie to our life to so we won't get lost. And thus we walk the earth, revolving around our descriptions like beasts tied by the neck. He told us about when he and Don Juan once traveled to a small town in north of Mexico and sat down to rest on a bench in the church square. Suddenly, 10 or 12 youths came carrying a Judas figure made of cloth and canes. It was dressed in a blanket and sandals, like an Indian. They installed it in the town square, and that night there was a public burning. Everybody drank, and everybody took turns insulting the puppet as part of the ritual. With customs like that, people keep Judas alive. They remember him. They sustain him. They keep him in a true hell with their memories. And after burning him, next year, they resuscitate him and kill him again. The rigidity of human behavior is revealed in those routines. A person in the audience requested permission to speak and asked him whether his statement regarding how, by remembering him, the town keeps Judas alive, was meant literally or was just a metaphor. He answered, "Sorcerers affirm that as long as there is memory, there is awareness of being. since the current of thought is an injection of life. True death is oblivion. The idea that time moves in a straight line from past to future is completely primitive, something that goes against the experience of sorcerers and even of modern science. Due to that limited interpretation, most of humanity is kept prisoner in a tunnel of time, where their destiny becomes an infinite repetition of the same. The reality of our condition is that we are energetically blocked due to what sorcerers call the collective fixation of the assemblage point. A remarkable consequence of that fixation is the way we specialize. When preparing for a profession, for example, instead of widening our scope, we usually end up becoming sedentary, boring individuals, without creativity and without motivation. In a few years, our life becomes tedious, but far from taking responsibility and changing ourselves, we blame our circumstances. One of the most serious habits that shape our inventory is the habit of telling others everything we do or stop doing. It is an important part of socialization. We want to generate an exclusive image of ourselves, but the image ends up molding itself to other people's expectations, and we become imitations of what we could be. Once they consider us as facts, we have to follow certain behavioral patterns, even when we are sick of them, or even if we don't believe in them, because any intent to change puts us up against the wall. Most people feel empty when they don't have love or friends, because they have built their life on a superficial base of relationships, and they don't have any time left to ponder their destiny. Unfortunately, friendship is generally based on an exchange of intimacies, while a basic premise of mundane relationships is that everything we say someday will be used against us. It is a sad fact that the ones we care about the most are also our worst headaches. Sorcerers maintain that talking about ourselves makes us accessible and weak, while learning how to be quiet fills us with power. A principle of the path of knowledge is to turn your own life into something so unpredictable that not even you yourself know what's going to happen. The only way of leaving the collective inventory is moving away from those who know us well. After a time, mental walls that trap us become a little softer, and they start to give in. That's when genuine opportunities for change appear, and we can take control of our lives. If we were able to transcend interpretation and face pure perception without prejudice, the impression of a world of objects would vanish. In its place, we would witness energy as it flows in the universe. Under such conditions, the chain of other people's thoughts would no longer have the smallest effect on us, and we would not feel obliged to be or do anything. Then our senses would have no limits. That's seeing. He defined it further. The sorcerer's objective is to break the fixation of social interpretations and to see energy directly. To see is a total perceptual experience. Seeing energy as it flows is an imperious need on the path of knowledge. Ultimately, all the effort of sorcerers is guided to that end. It is not enough for a warrior to know that the universe is energy. He has to verify it for himself. Seeing is a practical matter which has immediate consequences and far-reaching effects on our lives. The most dramatic of them is that sorcerers learn to see time as an objective dimension. He continued by saying that energy is distributed through the universe in layers. All conscious beings belong to one of these layers. We can get tuned to the energy of other bands due to a phenomenon known as alignment of perception. At certain points, the layers cross, generating energy vortexes where particular phenomena take place, phenomena which are of the greatest importance to sorcerers who see. Conditions for alignment are favorable there, and it happens spontaneously. Seers talk about passageways, bridges, and barriers in space, where the coordinates of time are annulled, and the traveler's awareness can penetrate into strange worlds. Inorganic beings from all corners of the universe take advantage of those points to cross the border to Earth, and we can do the same. It may seem incredible to you, but that kind of phenomena rains down on me. One time, they took me to a place in the north of Mexico, in the desert, and they showed me a place where the cosmic intent whirls. For hours, we all fought to penetrate that area, but it was impossible. It was as if there was a barrier. We asked him what it was, and he answered, I could never unravel it, but a sorcerer with sufficient power who knows what use he could make of it. Another time, I witnessed the most extraordinary effects of one of those energy passageways. I was driving in the desert when a storm hit the highway, completely obscuring my area of vision. Suddenly, a tow truck appeared next to my car. The driver signaled me to follow him, and I drove a long distance beside him, protected by the enormous flank of the truck. Finally, the storm dropped, and we both stopped. We were on a gravel road, which I didn't know. The truck driver jumped down and greeted me. I recognized him. He was an Indian shaman from the area whom I'd met before. He told me that by protecting me in that way, he was paying me back for a gift I had given him years before. And he told me not to try to identify the place where we were, because it was a hiding place in the second attention. I was astonished by his words. That warrior had enough energy to transport me with my car and everything to another world. After a brief conversation, he told me that it was time to leave because the storm was already over. I followed him along an unknown road, and then I was on the freeway again. Of the tow truck, there was not a trace. These anecdotes excited our imaginations, so we harassed him with all kinds of questions. But Carlos remained imperturbable. He said that this sort of thing happens more frequently than we would believe, and that it is not to be reasoned out, but to be experienced. He continued, explaining that another shocking and very useful effect of seeing energy as it flows is that sorcerers perceive other people's feelings directly, like thermal waves discharged from our luminous mass, impelled by emotions. They even detect feelings that the person himself does not realize are there. It's as if they have infrared vision, which guides them where their fellow men can't see anything but an impenetrable darkness. This allows them to be on their guard regarding other people's behavior. For that reason, it is impossible to deceive a seer, and it is extremely difficult to surprise him. However, the true value of seeing is that it helps us understand intent. Once we witness the totality of existence as levels of energy, we see that there is something else there, an ulterior purpose, certain rules of action which organize everything. Sorcerers identify that purpose as a supreme and impersonal will, and through their inner silence they can tune themselves to it. Naturally, a man of knowledge with such a tool at his disposal will combine things in the most appropriate way for his energy. An abundant and serene energy is the mark of the sorcerer who sees. In another lecture, he told us that we are all born with the totality of our energy, but we have generally become a mess before we die. It's as if we were born with a certain quantity of money in the bank, some with 1 million, others with more, and some with less. The difference doesn't matter. In general, it is a sufficient quantity to allow us to live worthy lives until the end. But, for lack of an adequate culture of energy management, most people immediately begin to spend their inheritance in stupid ways. And when they die, they are in a state of pitiful misery. However, some learn how to save and even multiply their earnings. They also die, but with more capital. They go further. The difference between dying with all our earnings as a warrior full of power or to die destitute like a dog in the street is due to the way we treat our energy. He explained that the luminous field that surrounds us is like a gigantic ball of cotton candy floss, a densely interwoven cloud of fibers which emanates energy like a radiator. When two people enter into a relationship, what happens is an exchange of emanations. Our fibers of light interact, whether we want it or not, and without us realizing it. It is a law that energy flows from where there is more to where there is less. As we spend life in constant interaction, the normal outcome is that, at the end, we are a little of ourselves and much of what the other one left in us. However, warriors learn how to break the law of energy exchange by means of exercises like the recapitulation, whose purpose is to recover energy. In that way, they become self-sufficient. They recover their capital and deliberately return all their loans. Since there is no more waste, we can say that their luminous eggs are thermic. To protect themselves against radiation, sorcerers usually adopt strange customs. Some use power objects in order to deviate the pressure of other people's attention. Others stay separate from people and become hermits. Juan Tuma used dark glasses so that energy would not dissipate from the eyes. The true value of that precaution was that it created a barrier between him and others, and he stopped being accessible. Our exchanges have very serious implications in our life, and it has given rise to statements like, "Tell me who your friends are, and I will tell you who you are." That saying describes not only a state of psychological affinity between people, but also a measurable energetic effect, which a sorcerer can perceive. If you want to be yourself, learn how to be alone. The crucial point is our interactions, since they can liberate us or enslave us. Not all exchange is undesirable. Warriors seek the company of those who will help them grow. Dealing with sorcerers forces us to be alert and impeccable. On the other hand, ordinary relationships debilitate us because they demand a predetermined behavior pattern. Just think of couple relationships where the level of demands usually is so high that it sometimes means the end of the person's own life. One of the present asked him how the exchange of luminous emanations happens in sexual relationships. He answered that since life began with a sexual act, we can consider all the energy available to us as sexual energy. Therefore, the primary consideration in the treatment of our luminosity is related to this fundamental dimension of our being. The first thing we have to realize is that our emotional connections with people are a consequence of the way we were made. At that moment, the luminosity at our disposal was defined once and for all. In the realm of energy, we are sealed units. We are the sum of the passion and desire that our parents gathered at the moment when they conceived us. Everything that came later, the waste and the compromises, or the path of saving and recovering energy, are manipulations within those limits. This is where the first problem will arise. Since the sexual relationships between human beings are usually routine acts, socialization traps us in such a way that it enters into our intimacy, transforming the magical possibility of a conscious energy union into an obscene, obligatory routine with undesirable consequences. And that is reflected vividly in our children. In support of these assertions, he told us a joke about a guy who tells his wife, "Dear, on Monday I cannot be with you because I play poker with my friends. On Tuesday I go bowling. On Wednesday they wait for me in the gym." He continued this way, listing his occupations for the whole week. Finally she replies, "In this house we fuck every day at 8 o'clock, whether you're here or not." The problem is not in making love, but in doing it out of habit. The effect of all routines is to dissipate energy, and that is seen most tragically in our sexual routine, because its result, in most cases, are children that come to the world with a serious deficit of vitality. We are so adapted to this situation that when a child is born with all his power, we consider him an anomaly and take him to a psychiatrist to have him tranquilized. Due to the casual way we select our reproductive partners, Don Juan called the generation of modern society children of aberration. There are two kinds of sex, the boring and the energetic. For social purposes, it is very difficult to be the product of energetic sex. Almost everyone comes from routine sex, and, in the view of a seer, we have our energy rolled up in pleats, as if we were very old already from birth. Since we cannot change our inheritance, it is a matter of sanity to learn to economize our resources. According to sorcerers, the main drain of energy in a man or woman is through reproduction. It is a great investment because it affects our luminosity permanently. Therefore, the purpose of bringing children into this world should be deliberately considered with the utmost seriousness. If we are the product of a bored fuck, and at the same time devote ourselves to the reproductive impulse, the result is the inevitable fragmentation of our energy unit. The luminous eggs of parents are like buckets with holes from where water is leaking. Those holes are the children. Such a person will never accumulate enough power to enable him to change unless he applies the principles of the warrior's way in his life. Somebody in the audience asked him how the exchange between parents and children happened. He answered that to cut the umbilical cord of a newborn does not mean that the baby's connection with his progenitors is automatically broken. The cord of luminosity stays active for a lifetime as an energy straw. It is a real connection, which seers see as a fiber that goes from the parents' luminous cocoons to their children. Since one is not aware that this drainage is taking place, there is no way we can avoid it. It doesn't matter how much love parents and children profess for each other from the point of view of energy. That love is only concern for the luminosity which has been exchanged. For that reason, parents are usually so demanding with their children and try to mold them in every possible way so that they will end up being like them. To bring them into this world is not a clean delivery. It is an investment. Seers can see how, due to the pillaging they have been subjected to, parents' energy is torn, and fragments of their luminous fabric are projected outward like an old and frayed shirt, or as if they've been squashed and their bowels are hanging out. A hideous condition. Carlos's descriptions, accompanied with graphic gestures, had the effect of alarming almost all his listeners. I could see it in the faces of people around me. With a trembling voice, one of the assistants asked him how a warrior could patch up his drainage holes. He answered that the only possibility we have of canceling the commands of socialization is abandoning father and mother and never look back. As for the children, he claimed, there's no other remedy than to eat them. If you cannot eat up a boy, he will eat you. These words were too much, and I noticed that some of the present left the room. Unruffled, Carlos told us how he was once involved in an extraordinary encounter with a being from another realm, whom he wanted to liberate from her condition of slavery. As a result of his recklessness, he was forced to engender a body for this alien energy. When her mother gave birth, Don Juan took the creature, who was a girl, and left with her. When he came back, he put a dish full of meat in front of us and told us, "Here is your daughter. Eat her." We could not do anything else. Compelled by the imperious look on his face, the mother and I complied with the order. For us, it was a monstrous act, but it had an invaluable effect. We reestablished our luminous integrity once and for all. By sharing the tender meat, we both recovered all of our affection, all the light that we had poured on the creature, and we closed our holes. We were complete again. 8 years later, Don Juan brought the girl back. He introduced her as the Blue Scout and said he had kept her hidden during that whole time, and that what her mother and I had eaten was a suckling. Upon hearing this outcome, a sigh of relief passed through the room. Carlos continued, "I cannot say that my daughter's return has inspired anything, neither love nor any consolation in the idea that everything had been a joke, nor anything else. My energy was not moved. Out of curiosity, some of the present wanted to know what had happened with the girl during those 8 years. He answered, my teacher raised her in the north of Mexico among the Yaquis. he transformed her into a ferocious being. She was not a normal creature. Her energy came from another realm. She used power plants without discrimination. She was so untamed that to take her from Mexico to the United States, I had to tie her and put her in the trunk of the car like a suitcase. We, her physical parents, could never touch her. She only seemed a little docile when she was with Don Juan. I remember that the little girl once, of her own free will, put her head down on my knees. Her mother and I looked at each other, surprised, hardly able to believe it. All that was an effect of the Nagual's maneuver. That girl knew she was alone, that she wouldn't have a couple of parents to parasitize. She was transformed into a being who fit the measure of her true constitution. We are aggressive, territorial beings. We are not domestic animals. That girl is a vivid example of what a maneuver of sorcerers can achieve in the sense of compacting our energy. On another occasion, when he mentioned the topic of bored sex, his conversation concerned the manipulation of sexual energy. He told us that the generating force which was placed within us is transcendent and has many uses we are not fully aware of. It's pitiful that most people know how to think about sex only in terms of bodily pleasure. It's like the limited use a savage can make of a very valuable book. If by chance he trips over it, all he can see in it is a suitable material for lighting a fire. We spend most of our life worrying about the way members of the opposite sex will see us. That implies, first, a constant attention toward our physical appearance. And second, it makes us attend places where people in the same situation go, to have dates and to invest many, many hours talking about peripheral things, but with the mind fixed on our primary objective. This kind of investment is exaggerated. Sorcerers know that the foundation of sex is neither pleasure nor reproduction. Do you really believe that the power which governs us would bother creating something as important as this generating power, only to provide us with brief instants of distraction, or in order to perpetuate us like mushrooms on the earth? The purpose of sex goes much further. It connects us with the mystery of the origin of all things, because the universe arose from an explosion that is still going on and expresses itself every time we make love. If the source of what we are is this germinating power, then the center of our inner labor must be the rechanneling of our sexual energy. Making a very expressive gesture with his hands, he exclaimed, "Realize what you have and don't waste it. Sex is money, cash money. Our cosmic destiny is to expand our awareness. For that reason, we were endowed with a portion of the creative power of the eagle. Sex was made for dreaming." He affirmed that, in theory, the sexual exchange of a couple doesn't have to affect the luminosity available for each of the participants, since man takes from the woman as much as she takes from him, and the result is a neutral balance. In any event, what is undesirable in the operation is that their energies become mixed, which is how knots of dependence are generated, and they restrict our freedom and require long years of recapitulation to be unraveled. But in practice, that kind of exchange exhausts our vitality. Because when we make love, the movement of energy doesn't take place in a closed system. There is always a hole. To have sex with a person is to make out with the whole genetic chain that gave him or her origin. Because, due to drainage fibers that connect us with our progenitors, human beings are not luminous autonomies, but terminal elements. Although the sexual act happens between individuals, it is the human mold, the collective fixation of the assemblage point, who takes most of the energy in the process. That fixation is responsible for the feelings of jealousy, dependence, and attachment that we relate to our sexual relationships. And it makes us become confirmed investors, perverting the noble word, love, into something vile. The ordinary man's attitude to the possibility of loving is that of an unfeeling, calculating machine. I love my children because they are depositories of my energy. My wife because she washes my clothes. She cooks for me, and I fuck her. My dog because it takes care of the house. My country because I was born here. My God because he will save me. His face contracted in an expression of disgust. How difficult it is to give without expecting anything in return. Everyday love ends up becoming a debt when others claim from us the same attention they gave us. And a debt of feelings is something fatal. For these reasons, one of the priorities of a teacher is to destroy the apprentice's sexual patterns. This is a crucial matter that requires lifelong work, but it is necessary to begin from the first moment, because becoming a member of a party of sorcerers cannot be used as a pretext for sexual deficiencies. If we don't solve that matter as ordinary men and women, our chances to advance on the warrior's path are very slim. Sorcerers have many ways of correcting an apprentice. Some don't have any scruples and subject the pupil to real tortures, attacking his weaknesses until he gets cured or he cracks. Others, like my teacher, are extremely delicate on this point and prefer to work with the energy from inside, making the apprentice become aware of himself and react. Any method is legitimate, as long as it produces the results desired. The Nagual Julian, for example, combined a merciless efficiency with a tremendous ability to become what he wanted. It is not that he acted, rather, he genuinely transformed himself, moving his assemblage point to the position corresponding to the form of an animal or another person. One of his favorites was the form of a woman. Once in the shape of a beautiful girl, he seduced his apprentice, Juan Matus, who at that time was barely 20 years old and hot as a young bull. When they were both in bed, he moved his assemblage point back to its habitual position and was a man again, which made the youth run terrified from the room. For a mentality like the one Juan Matus had at the time, the impact was devastating. It demolished his stereotypes. It was a grotesque joke, but uniquely effective. In one slash, it broke his inclination to surrender to the first female who made herself available. Don Juan never forgave his teacher for the joke, but as time passed, he learned how to laugh at the story. At this point, Carlos allowed a small round of questions. One of those present interrogated him regarding celibacy, whether it was indispensable or not for sorcerers, and what the advantages were. He answered, "A priori, sorcerers are neither for nor against anything. They see that everything depends on the congenital disposition of energy. There are some who are born with the necessary passion to make love every day, while others don't even have enough energy, don't have enough for a masturbation. Some recover their luminous totality by means of discipline. Others have the appearance of strainers and will die incomplete. All these factors modify and determine the behavior of sorcerers regarding sex. What characterizes sorcerers is their refusal to be victims of the collective reproductive command and their ability to choose a responsible use for their energy. Also, none of them can be trapped in any sexual category. They are free. They proceed every moment according to what power indicates to them. To have that vision, they cultivate a sobriety that the ordinary person doesn't know. He explained that, in general, the new seers opt for a position of celibacy and self-sufficiency because they are very greedy with their energy, and they prefer to dedicate it to the expansion of their awareness. They have witnessed worlds on their journey into infinity that make all other things seem pale and without attraction, even the sexual act. Don Juan said that making love is for those who don't have attachments. Responding to another question, he said that there is no such thing as a sexual problem, only individuals with their own and very particular dilemmas to solve. To see it in a generic form is a trap, because it makes us dilute our responsibility and excuse ourselves with the notion that everybody else is the same as we are. Like birth and death, to procreate is an individual act, a gift which the eagle has granted us. What sorcerers demand is something very simple: responsibility. The society in which we live is a school where they force us to comply with astonishingly cruel orders. We become old, and making love turns into a grotesque parody. Society imposes a drainage on us, a preset behavior that doesn't stop until there is not a single blink of light left in us. I had an example of this in my grandfather. The old man used to say, "You cannot fuck them all, but you have to try." He already had one foot in the grave and still kept reacting the way they had taught him. He spent half his time getting a woman and the other half working to maintain her, and he never realized that he had never been shown. Finally, on his deathbed, the old man became bitter with the idea that his lovers didn't want him for his manliness anymore, but for his money. "She doesn't love me," he whimpered. And his grandsons assured him, "She does love you, Grandpa." The stupid man died this way, screaming, "Here I come, Mommy." Is it necessary to be a sorcerer to grasp that this is not all we can have as human beings? He admitted that before deciding to practice the warrior's way, he believed he was a seductive man and had behaved as one, driven by the Latin male stereotype. Once, I seduced a girl and brought her to my car. We both got so horny that the windshield got all steamed up with all the kisses and hugs we gave each other. When I was most turned on, I discovered that the supposed girl was a man. Another time I fell sincerely in love with a young girl, but eventually I began to suspect that she cheated on me. I changed my car and stayed watching from the corner of her house. The other one arrived. When I asked her to explain, she told me, "With you, it's love, and with him, it's just sex." This kind of encounter made me decide to behave with more moderation in my love affairs. But the pressure of my stereotype was too strong. I continued to spend my energy on sex according to the pattern of my race, until Don Juan gave me the choice. I had to either calm down or abandon the apprenticeship. Responding to another question, he maintained that the best way of stopping the energy drainage that takes place through sexuality is learning how to make magnanimous gestures which counter and loosen the fixation of our attention. We have received life as a cosmic gift, and it is our privilege to reflect that gesture with total detachment. Thanks to his indifference, the warrior is in the position of turning his love into a blank check, unconditional, an abstract affection, because it does not start from desire. What a marvelous thing. Contrary to what a man in the street thinks, the nature of sorcerers is telluric, passionate. But the object of their passion is no longer carnal. They have seen the glue that ties all things together, a wave of passion that floods the universe and cannot be stopped. Because should that happen, everything would be reduced to nothing. Through their seeing, they have established their base on the cornerstone of awareness, the most powerful state of individual attention. Their love is an overpowering reality that vibrates in every breath, is expressed in every gesture, and is given meaning in every word. It is a force which impels them to explore, to take risks, and to evolve, constantly bringing out the best of themselves. Sorcerers have discovered the most refined form of love because they love themselves. They know that all we give out is a reflection of what we have inside. They have put the power of passion to the service of being, and it gives them the necessary impulse to undertake the only quest that counts, the quest for oneself.